I did not yell. I did not slam a door. I simply picked up my phone, opened my banking app, and typed in my PIN the same way I do every Tuesday morning when I pay my electric bill. Calm, quiet, deliberate. That was a Thursday in October. By Sunday, my son had left 43 voicemails. I know because I counted them while I sat on my back porch drinking my coffee, watching the sun come up over the tree line, listening to the birds like I used to do when he was small enough to sit in my lap and ask me what they were called. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because if I don't, you won't understand why what I did wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. There's a difference, and I've spent 64 years learning it. My name is George. I was a general contractor for 31 years in western Pennsylvania. Poured concrete, framed walls, roofed houses in January when the temperature dropped below 20. I built things with my hands that are still standing today. Schools, churches, a hospital wing in a town about 40 minutes east of Pittsburgh where my father grew up. I'm proud of that. I still drive past those buildings sometimes and feel something in my chest that I can't quite name, but it feels like it matters. I raised my son the same way. With my hands. With my presence. His mother passed when he was 11. Pancreatic cancer. And she was gone in 4 months from diagnosis to burial. I remember thinking the world had tilted on its axis, and nothing would ever sit level again. But my son needed me, so I got up every morning and made breakfast, and drove him to school and coached his Little League team on Saturday mornings, even when I was so tired I could barely see straight. I did not hire a nanny. I did not ship him to his grandparents in Ohio. I showed up. Every single day, I showed up. He grew up fine, or so I believed. Graduated high school, went to a culinary program in Philadelphia, came back to Pittsburgh with big ideas about opening a restaurant. He had his mother's eyes and her energy in the kitchen. Watching him cook was like watching her again, and honestly, that was enough for me to say yes to almost anything he asked. The first time he asked for money, he was 26. He needed $20,000 to cover a lease deposit on a space in Lawrenceville, a neighborhood that was just starting to turn around. I had the money. I gave it to him without a contract, without interest, without asking for anything in return except that he try his best, which he said he would. The restaurant did well for 2 years. Then it struggled. He came back and asked for more to cover payroll, to upgrade the kitchen equipment, to rebrand. I gave it. Again and again, I gave it. Over the next 7 years, the total I had put into his business, into his life, really was somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000. Some of it was structured as a loan I co-signed through a small community bank. Most of it was just money I handed him because he needed it, and I had it, and he was my son. I wasn't looking for a return on investment. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't keeping score. I was a father, and that is what fathers do. You give. You give without a receipt. You give because the alternative, watching your child fail when you had the means to help, is not something a man like me can live with. What I was looking for, I suppose, was just to be included, to be seen, not celebrated, not put on a pedestal, just to know that after everything, I was still someone he wanted in the room. The new restaurant was his 3rd location. He had expanded twice in 5 years. Lawrenceville was still running. He had a second spot downtown, and now he was opening a flagship on the North Shore, right along the river, with a view of the stadium and a kitchen he told me was going to be the most sophisticated in the city. He called me when he signed the lease. He was so excited his voice cracked, and I sat in my truck in a parking lot at a Lowe's and smiled so hard my face hurt. I co-signed another loan for that one, $225,000. I put up my property in Cranberry Township as collateral. My house, the one I built with my own crew 20 years ago, the one with the wraparound porch and the garden in the back where his mother used to grow tomatoes. I did not hesitate. He was my son. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in early October. He had been talking about it for months. He was bringing in a chef from New York to collaborate for the opening weekend. He had a PR firm handling press, a photographer. A local food critic was supposed to come. He told me the guest list was limited. Very curated, he said. Important people from the restaurant industry, some investors, a few journalists. I told him I understood. I told him I was proud of him. 2 weeks before the opening, I called to ask if he needed me to do anything. Help set up, move furniture. I had been helping him set up his spaces since the first one. I know how to run conduit, hang shelving, do the finish work that contractors charge a premium for. I had done probably $30,000 worth of free labor across his 3 locations over the years. He told me he had it handled. He said the opening weekend was really just for the press and the industry people. He said we would celebrate properly as a family the following weekend. I said, of course. Whatever he needed. What I did not know was that my son's definition of family had quietly shifted in the previous 2 years. His girlfriend, they had been together since he was 31, a woman I had welcomed into my home, bought birthday presents for, asked after, genuinely because I liked her, and she seemed to genuinely care about him, had become the primary architect of his social life. She had opinions about his image, about the kind of people he should be seen with, about the story he was telling publicly about himself and his success. I found this out in pieces, from a neighbor whose daughter followed my son on Instagram, from a detail his cousin let slip at a family cookout in August, and finally, in full, on the night of the grand opening, when I drove past the restaurant on my way home from dinner with a friend and saw the lights on inside, and the people gathered at the bar, and the photographer outside on the sidewalk, and my son standing at the entrance in a charcoal blazer, shaking hands and laughing, looking like every bit the man I had raised him to be. I pulled over. I sat in my truck for a moment, and then I did something I probably should not have done, which was walk to the door. He saw me before I knocked. I watched his expression move through at least 3 different emotions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, something that looked like panic, and then, when he composed himself, a kind of careful pleasantness that I recognized as the face people wear when they are managing a situation. He stepped outside and closed the door most of the way behind him. "Dad," he said, "what are you doing here?" I told him I was in the neighborhood. I told him I just wanted to see the space. He glanced back through the glass. He told me tonight wasn't really a good time. He told me it was a press event, that it was very controlled, that the PR firm had given strict instructions about the guest list. I told him I understood. I told him I just thought, since I was here and he was here, maybe I could just see the dining room, not stay, just look. He opened his mouth and then someone inside called his name and he turned and for a second I saw through the gap in the door. I saw the room, my son's room, the room my money helped build, the bar with the custom lighting, the reclaimed wood that I had personally helped him source from a mill in Fayette County, the kitchen pass-through with the copper accents that he had texted me photos of 6 months ago, writing that he couldn't believe how good it looked. He turned back to me and he said, "Dad, I really need you to come back another time. Tonight's not right." And then a man came out from inside, someone I didn't recognize, someone with a name tag and an earpiece, and my son looked at him and said, "Can you make sure we're keeping the entrance clear?" "Thanks." He did not introduce me. He did not say, "This is my father." He did not say, "Give me 1 minute." He looked at me with something close to apology in his face, but not quite, and he said, "I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" And he went back inside. I stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant my money built, and I listened to the sound of laughter through the glass, and I breathed in the cold air coming off the river, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about a Little League game in 2003 when he struck out with the bases loaded and cried in the parking lot after, and I sat with him on the curb for 45 minutes and did not tell him it was okay. I told him that it hurt, and that it should hurt, and that he was going to feel this and then get up and keep playing, because that's what men in our family do. I thought about driving to Philadelphia at 2 in the morning when he was 22 and had his first real kitchen job. And he called me crying because the head chef had humiliated him in front of the whole line and he didn't know if he could go back. I thought about the paperwork I had signed at the bank 8 months ago, the collateral I had put up, my house, my porch, the garden. I walked back to my truck. I did not go home right away. I drove along the river for a while. I thought about calling someone, but there was no one I wanted to call. This was not a conversation I wanted to have out loud yet. So I just drove. And I let it settle, and by the time I pulled into my driveway I had made a decision, not out of anger. Anger burns fast and leaves a mess. This was something slower, something that had been accumulating for years like water in a basement, quiet and invisible until the floor buckles. I went inside. I made myself a sandwich. I sat at my kitchen table where I have sat every morning for 20 years, and I looked at the photographs on the wall. Him at 6 in a Halloween costume. Him at 16 in his Little League jacket. Him at his culinary school graduation, standing next to me with his diploma, both of us squinting into the sun. I looked at my hands. Still rough. Still the same hands that built the things I built. Then I opened my laptop and I navigated to the loan portal for the community bank, and I logged in, and I pulled up the cosigner information for the North Shore property loan, and I began the process of formally withdrawing my collateral from the agreement. It is not a simple process. There are forms and notifications and a period of review. The bank would contact him. There would be a renegotiation required or a default proceeding. He would need to find replacement collateral or pay down a significant portion of the principal. $225,000 does not simply disappear from an agreement without consequence. I submitted the paperwork at 11:47 on a Thursday night. Then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. I don't know exactly what that says about me, but it's the truth, and I have always believed that the truth is the only thing worth saying. I did not call him the next morning. He called me, on the Friday, around noon. A quick message saying the opening had gone great, that the critic had loved the food, that he would tell me all about it when we talked. He sounded happy, lighter than he had in a while. I texted back, glad it went well. The bank must have sent the notification on Saturday morning, because that was when my phone started ringing. The first call came at 9:42. I was in the garden. I looked at the screen and I let it ring. The second came 4 minutes later. Then another. Then a voicemail. Then another call. By noon there had been 14. By evening there had been 26. By Sunday morning, 43. I listened to the voicemails in order, on Sunday afternoon, sitting in my chair on the porch with my coffee. The first few were confusion. Dad, I think there's been some kind of mistake with the bank. Can you call me? His voice tight but controlled, still confident that it was an error. By the fourth voicemail, the confusion had shifted toward something more urgent. Dad, I need to talk to you about the loan. This is serious. Please call me back. By the eighth, it was something I had not heard from my son since he was 11 years old, standing outside a funeral home in a suit that was too big for him. He sounded young again, scared. By the 15th, his girlfriend was on the message too, her voice careful and diplomatic, saying they just wanted to understand what was happening, and could we all get together and talk about it. By the 22nd, there was no more diplomatic tone. He was crying. He said he didn't know what he had done wrong. He said he needed me to explain. He said the bank had told him he had 30 days to secure alternative collateral or they would begin default proceedings, and that could threaten not just the North Shore location but potentially the other two as well, because he had cross-collateralized certain assets. On the 40th voicemail, he said, Dad, I'm sorry. I don't know what I did, but I'm sorry. I listened to all of them, every single one, because I am his father, and whatever else has happened, I owe him the dignity of being heard. On Sunday evening, I called him back. He answered before the first ring finished. He started talking immediately, and I let him talk. He told me about the opening. He told me the review that came out was the best he had ever received. He told me the dining room had been packed every night since Thursday. He told me he was going to make it work. I let him talk until he had nothing left to say. Then I said, I drove past the opening on Thursday night. Silence. I said, I came to the door. He said, Dad. I said, you didn't introduce me. He said something about the PR firm, about the guest list, about the image they were trying to present. I said, I signed a loan for $225,000 with my house as collateral, and you did not introduce me to the man at the door. He was quiet for a long time. I said, I want you to understand something. I am not a vendor. I am not a check. I am not something you manage when it's convenient and redirect when it isn't. I am your father. I buried your mother when I was 37 years old, and I did not quit. I did not leave. I showed up every single morning for the rest of your childhood because you needed someone there, and I was the someone. That is not a business transaction. That is a man's life. He said, I know. I said, I don't think you do. Not yet. But you're going to. I told him I had submitted the paperwork to remove my collateral from the loan. I told him I had also made a separate decision about the other outstanding support I had been providing, the informal amounts that we had never documented, that I would be stopping going forward. I told him that none of this meant I did not love him. I want that to be absolutely clear. I love my son the way I loved building things, not because it was easy, but because it meant something, and because I put my whole self into it. But I am 64 years old. I have maybe 20 or 25 good years left if I take care of myself, and I am not going to spend them being managed. He asked what he should do. I told him that was a question only he could answer, and that answering it himself, without my money as a cushion, was probably the most important thing he could do. He asked if I would still be his father. I said, I have been your father since the moment they put you in my arms in that hospital room, and I have never once stopped. That is not what's changing. What's changing is the arrangement we have both been pretending was normal. We talked for another hour, he cried. I let him. I did not try to fix it. Before we hung up, he said, I'm sorry about Thursday night. I'm really sorry. I believed him. I think he meant it the way young men mean things fully, in the moment, without yet understanding the depth of what they're apologizing for. Understanding comes later. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes a bank notification on a Saturday morning. I told him to call me next week. Not about the loan, not about the business, just to talk. He said he would. I put down the phone and looked out at the backyard, where the last of the fall tomatoes were still clinging to the vine, stubborn and small, and more red than they had any right to be in October. I thought about his mother and what she would have said about all of this, and I think she would have looked at me with those eyes of hers and said, George, you waited too long. She was usually right about things like that. I got up from my chair and I went inside, and I made dinner for one, the way I have made dinner for one for many years. And it was quiet, and it was fine. And when I went to bed that night, I left my phone on the kitchen table, and I did not check it once. My house is still standing. I put my name on this property deed in 2004, and I intend to walk off this porch on my own terms, whenever that day comes. Some things cannot be bought. Some things cannot be built on a foundation someone else laid. My son is going to have to learn that now, in real time. I hope he does. I believe he can. I am his father, after all. And I did not raise him to fail. I raised him to be worth the cost of everything I gave him. Now it's time for him to prove it.